Hi, this is Pastor Josh from First Baptist de Queen. Thank you for joining us as we are reading through God's Word every single day. Today, we are beginning in Leviticus chapter 11, starting in verse 1. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, "Speak to the people of Israel, saying, These are the living things that you may eat among all the animals that are on the earth." So God here, He's been showing the people up to this point in Leviticus that everyone can worship. No matter how much money you have, what kind of offering you bring, everyone can worship. He's been showing them how important worship is. And so now He's going to show them how they can be taken care of in how they live their lives, and in the food choices they make. They are reminded of all that God has done and provided for them. Verse 2. Verse 3. Whatever parts the hoof and is cloven-footed, and chews the cud among the animals you may eat. Nevertheless, among those that chew the cud or part the hoof, you shall not eat these. The camel, because it chews the cud but does not part the hoof, it is unclean to you. And the rock badger, because it chews the cud but does not part the hoof, is unclean to you. And the hare, because it chews the cud but does not part the hoof, is unclean to you. And the pig, because it parts the hoof and is cloven-footed but does not chew the cud, is unclean to you. You shall not eat any of their flesh, and you shall not touch their carcasses. They are unclean to you. So in a similar way that in the Garden of Eden, God told Adam and Eve, don't eat the tree, don't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, but you can eat from anything else. God here is telling the people, you can eat from anything except these things. And it is to remind them, every time they see those animals, every time those animals are out and about, remind them of all God has provided for them, how God has taken care of them and looked out for them, and how much God loves them. Verse 9, these you may eat of all that are in the waters. Everything in the waters that have fins and that has fins and scales, whether in the seas or in the rivers, you may eat. But anything in the seas or in the rivers that does not have fins and scales, of the swarming creatures in the waters and of the living creatures that are in the waters, is detestable to you. You shall regard them as detestable. You shall not eat any of their flesh, and you shall detest their carcasses. Everything in the waters that does not have fins and scales is detestable to you. And these you shall detest among the birds. They shall not be eaten. They are detestable. The eagle, the bearded vulture, the black vulture, the kite, the falcon of any kind, every raven of any kind, the ostrich, the nighthawk, the seagull, the hawk of any kind, the little owl, the cormorant, the short-eared owl, the barn owl, the tawny owl, the carrion vulture, the stork, the heron of any kind, the hoopoe, and the bat. All winged insects that go on all fours are detestable to you. Yet among the winged insects that go on all fours, you may eat those that have jointed legs above their feet, with which to hop on the ground. Of them you may eat the locust of any kind, the bald locust of any kind, the cricket of any kind, and the grasshopper of any kind. But all other winged insects that have 4 feet are detestable to you. And by these you shall become unclean. Whoever touches their carcasses shall be unclean until the evening. And whoever carries any part of their carcass, shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. Every animal that parts the hoof but is not cloven-footed or does not chew the cud is unclean to you. Everyone who touches them shall be unclean. And all that walk on their paws among the animals that go on all fours are unclean to you. Whoever touches their carcass shall be unclean until the evening. And whoever carries their carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. They are unclean to you. And these are unclean to you among the swarming things that swarm on the ground: the mole rat, the mouse, the great lizard of any kind, the gecko, the monitor lizard, the sand lizard, the chameleon. These are unclean to you among all that swarm. Whoever touches them when they are dead shall be unclean until the evening. And anything on which any of them falls when they are dead shall be unclean, whether it is an article of wood or a garment or a skin or a sack, any article that is used for any purpose. It must be put into water, and it shall be unclean until the evening. Then it shall be clean. And if any of them falls into any earthenware vessel, all that is in it shall be unclean, and you shall break it. Any food in it that could be eaten on which water comes shall be unclean. And all drink that could be drunk from every such vessel shall be unclean. And everything on which any part of their carcass falls shall be unclean. Whether oven or stove, it shall be broken in pieces. They are unclean and shall remain unclean for you. Nevertheless, a spring or a cistern holding water shall be clean. But whoever touches a carcass in them shall be unclean. And if any part of their carcass falls upon any seed grain that is to be sown, it is clean. But if water is put on the seed and any part of their carcass falls on it, it is unclean to you. So God is pointing out certain elements of His own creation, of which later on in the book of Acts, He will declare all of it clean. He's pointing out certain elements here during this time period that these creatures are unclean. He wants the people need to be constantly aware of the Lord and His presence in their lives. And so seeing all of these insects, all of these animals constantly around, not just walking around, but also being served in restaurants, in the market, will remind them constantly of the Lord's presence with them and among them. And if any animal which you may eat dies, whoever touches its carcass shall be unclean until the evening. And whoever eats of its carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. And whoever carries the carcass shall wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. The evening was the start of the next day. That goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 1, when it was evening and then morning the first day, evening and morning the second day. They determined the day began when the sun set. And so being unclean until the evening, you were unclean for the rest of that day, and then evening came, that was the beginning of the next day, when the sun set. Verse 41, every swarming thing that swarms on the ground is detestable, it shall not be eaten. Whatever goes on its belly and whatever goes on all fours, or whatever has many feet, any swarming thing that swarms on the ground you shall not eat, for they are detestable. You shall not make yourselves detestable with any swarming thing that swarms, and you shall not defile yourself with them, and become unclean through them. For I am the Lord your God. Consecrate yourselves therefore and be holy, for I am holy. You shall not defile yourselves with any swarming thing that crawls on the ground, for I am the Lord who brought you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. You shall therefore be holy, for I am holy. This is the law about beast and bird and every living creature that moves through the waters and every creature that swarms on the ground, to make a distinction between the unclean and the clean, and between the living creature that may be eaten and the living creature that may not be eaten. Chapter 12. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the people of Israel, saying, if a woman conceives and bears a male child, then she shall be unclean 7 days. As at the time of her menstruation, she shall be unclean. And on the 8th day, the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. Then she shall continue for 33 days in the blood of her purifying. She shall not touch anything holy, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purifying are completed. But if she bears a female child, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks, as in her menstruation, and she shall continue in the blood of her purifying for 66 days. And when the days of her purifying are completed, whether for a son or for a daughter, she shall bring to the priest at the entrance of the tent of meeting a lamb, a year old, for a burnt offering, and a pigeon or a turtle dove for a sin offering. And he shall offer it before the Lord and make atonement for her. Then she shall be clean from the flow of her blood. This is the law for her who bears a child, either male or female. And if she cannot afford a lamb, then she shall take 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, one for a burnt offering and the other for a sin offering, and the priest shall make atonement for her, and she shall be clean. Childbearing grew much more difficult after the fall, after the sin of Genesis chapter 3. And so, again, concession being made, no matter how much money you had, being able to come and worship, bringing whether a lamb or 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons, and the purification, again, reminder of the Lord's provision, the Lord's grace, the Lord's mercy, the Lord offering new life into the world through childbearing. Everything here thus far, it is looking to the Lord in worship, in His generosity, in all that He provides, and us worshiping Him in turn. Let's go to Mark chapter 5, starting in verse 21. And when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered about Him, and He was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing Him, he fell at His feet and implored Him earnestly, saying, My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be made well and live. And He went with him. And a great crowd followed Him and thronged about Him. And there was a woman who had had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and who had suffered much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and was no better, but rather grew worse. So you got two people here. You got Jairus, shows up to Jesus. He's a synagogue ruler. And his kid is incredibly sick, his little daughter. And so he seeks out Jesus to heal his daughter. But then you've also got this woman, as Jesus is going with Jairus to his house, this woman who is very, very sick and has spent all her money trying to get better from doctors. Doctors haven't been able to do it. So she seeks out Jesus in the same way Jairus sought out Jesus for his very sick daughter. Verse 27, she had heard the reports about Jesus and came up behind Him in the crowd and touched His garment. For she said, if I touch even His garments, I will be made well. She thought Jesus was so powerful that if she got close enough just to touch His clothes, not a superstition, but that He was so powerful that if she got that close, she would be healed. She had that much faith. Verse 29, and immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in Himself that power had gone out from Him, immediately turned about in the crowd and said, Who touched my garments? And His disciples said to Him, You see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, Who touched me? And He looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before Him and told Him the whole truth. And He said to her, Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease. So He commends her faith that she had in coming to Him, and her honesty in stepping forward and saying, It was me, I touched you. Verse 35, while He was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house, Jairus' house, some who said, Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further? They took too much time in coming. Maybe Jesus took too much time talking to the woman in the street when He had healed her. And people show up and say, Jairus, your daughter died. And the sickness got the better of her. Verse 36, but overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, Do not fear, only believe. And He allowed no one to follow Him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. And when He had entered, He said to them, Why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping. And they laughed at Him. But He put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with Him and went in to where the child was. So you have Jesus, Jairus' wife, Peter, James, and John, and they go into the room where Jairus' daughter has died. They've kicked out the mourners out of the house, and Jesus goes in there. Verse 41. Taking her by the hand, He said to her, Talitha cumi, which means, Little girl, I say to you, arise. And immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age. And they were immediately overcome with amazement. And He strictly charged them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. So Jesus resuscitates the daughter from the dead. And she gets up and walks around, and He tells them to get her something to eat. But don't tell anybody, because the time of knowing fully who He is has not arrived yet. That will come later. Psalm 38, a psalm of David for the memorial offering, verse 1. O Lord, rebuke me not in your anger, nor discipline me in your wrath. For your arrows have sunk into me, and your hand has come down on me. There is no soundness in my flesh because of your indignation. There is no health in my bones because of my sin. For my iniquities have gone over my head. Like a heavy burden, they are too heavy for me. My wounds stink and fester because of my foolishness. I am utterly bowed down and prostrate. All the day I go about mourning. For my sides are filled with burning, and there is no soundness in my flesh. I am feeble and crushed. I groan because of the tumult of my heart. There is a great deal happening, a great deal of discouragement, of life just beating him down. I love that verse 8 really describes it well. I am feeble and crushed. I groan because of the tumult of my heart. It's just so overwhelming. Verse 9, O Lord, all my longing is before you. I've poured it all out for you. My sighing is not hidden from you. My heart throbs. My strength fails me. In the light of my eyes, it also has gone from me. My friends and companions stand aloof from my plague, and my nearest kin stand far off. Those who seek my life lay their snares. Those who seek my heart speak of ruin and meditate treachery all day long. But I am like a deaf man, I do not hear, like a mute man who does not open his mouth. I have become like a man who does not hear, and in whose mouth are no rebukes. But for you, O Lord, do I wait. It is you, O Lord, my God, who will answer. For I said, only let them not rejoice over me, who boast against me when my foot slips. But you, O Lord, for you, O Lord, do I wait, because it's you who will answer. You will take care of me, God, even though not just people are oppressing me and the world is beating me down, but you, God, will provide for me as I pray. Verse 17, for I am ready to fall, and my pain is ever before me. I confess my iniquity. I am sorry for my sin. But my woes are vigorous, they are mighty. And many are those who hate me wrongfully. Those who render me evil for good, accuse me because I follow after good. Do not forsake me, O Lord. O my God, be not far from me. Make haste to help me, O Lord, my salvation. He's begging for help. Proverbs chapter 10, verse 8. The wise of heart will receive commandments, but a babbling fool will come to ruin. Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but he who makes his ways crooked will be found out. The wicked will be revealed for who they really are. You will have secure footing if you walk with integrity. Wisdom in your heart receives the instruction of the Lord and shows you the way in which to walk. Thank you for joining us as we are reading through God's Word every single day. I hope you will join us again tomorrow as we continue to explore everything that God says in His Word to us today.